All right, so we are back with another market watch, this time centered around BT10 right here. At the time of recording, at least for us, it is going to be sneak peek weekend, and then the next week afterward, it's going to be the official release. So we're closing in on the release of this, so we'll take a look at the current cards that would be impacted by the release of this set. We have quite a lot to go through, so we'll just get started right away. So let's go here. So the first card that we're going to be looking at is Venatio Dina Barada. I'm going to be real, I don't think anybody really is expected to play this deck, at least in a competitive sense. It's going to be relatively cheap, I would say, just because nobody really is looking for this. But for those that are looking for this card, we'll just take a look right away. So obviously, if you're just playing Dragon Empire or just anything in general, you're just going to want to put in your cycler cards. So we have the Gun Cycler here for Dragon Empire Fall Heart. Pretty cheap, I would say, at least in relatively speaking. Yeah, so there are a little bit lower copies here. You don't really play this in the current meta Dragon Empire decks, at least not in Bob Saga, and for Virgilla, you kind of only really play this as like a one-of at most. So you should have some easy time to get this, but then again, it's always good just to have cyclers, so this is something to consider, especially because with Venatior, you don't really know what you would want, and you kind of also really need as much help as you can get, so there's that. Another option that people have been playing in the deck is Shura, because Venatior retires its own rear guards. Shura here pretty much gives one of your rear guards the effect that when it's retired, puts it back into hand. So pretty decent utility there. I've seen a lot of people play this as a 3 or 4 of. Looking here, they're quite affordable, lots of listings and pretty high quantities for this, so this also shouldn't be really hard to get. I don't even know if current Varga lists even play this card, but this is something to consider. The higher rarities are higher rarities, but for the most part, you only really need this. And are you really going to get higher rarity cards for your Venatior deck? I don't think so. Another option that I see people playing is the Hakusui, the Stoicheia Dragon Empire Dual Nation card. Specifically this one just because on play you do get the plant token, and it is a card that you can retire to help fulfill the rest of your effects. We see here that its original printing still has a lot of listings for like $3 it looks like. Let's scroll down here. Yeah, some listings for 3 before going back up to like $7 or so. But they do have the most recent printing. However, not as much listings on here, but yeah, there's still a lot of quantities left on the market here. So, and this looks also to be $3 as well. So another sick option that you could consider when if you want to play this deck. Looks like a fine budget option. Now, speaking of budget, we still have Shenri here. Now, if you don't know what to put into your Dragon Empire deck, you're a-okay to just shove in Shenri. And we see here that it got reprinted in the Zero Tendo or the Virgilla Scarf deck that just came out, and it brought it down right here. See original Shenris. Looks like about 12, maybe like $13-14 roughly. And then the Zero Tendo one is about the same. So, I mean, you're never wrong with playing Shenri, I would say, but it's like a deck that, at least Venatior, you need a lot more help than you can get with Shenri, but for the most part, this is also a good enough card to, pick up because it has so many other coverage in other sort of decks, so that's fine as well. And then the other option that we have here is one that's going to come out soon. I believe it's going to come out with the release of the set, but in the Skyride manga, and it's Scarlet Flame. This is the Dragon Empire, or rather, it is Dragon Empire, but it's mainly for Dragonic Overlord here. If you see here, it's actually really generic. You just play it, draw a card, choose a card from hand, call it, and then you retire one of your opponent's front row rear guards. It's really simple. Pretty much just cycles, and then it plays in order. So, and if your deck wants to play orders or have order synergies, this is such a good card to have as well. We see it's pre-sale for $17.22, but again, this is pre-sale. We don't know exactly where this might land up, because we see here with like the deep lands, that was like about like $10. Same thing with Philias. So we're not too certain on how this would land, but this is something to consider as well, because not a lot of people might know about this, so it's good enough to pick up. And then the next main deck that's going to get supported is Draw-Jeweled Magnus here. Now, there's a couple of options that you can go. You could either play a pure Magnus build, shout out to you, Darren, but for the most part, the more common build that you will see is the Ignis build, where it plays mainly just this as like its new ride, and then Ignis still in the ride line, or not in the ride line, in the main deck. So you just have like a better grade 3 turn. That being said, both builds will still be playing the new Lithosagor. It's just a better Rockagor, and yeah, you do get like another Restander later, but for the most part, this card is still a good utility, just being able to have the additional effect of EB3 to draw a card. Scrolling down here, looks like they're all about $12 to $15 or so, and yeah, so they went up quite a little bit, but there's still a lot of listings on the market per se. And if you are interested in this deck, you can pick this up. I know that the Master Deck set released a bit ago, so people have wanted to pick up this card so they can play it with that. Speaking of the Master Deck set, this is also a good place to get some of the other cards that you would need. Not only do you get the Ignis, but also the other grade 4 support cards that you may want to consider, such as Zagon, Varpula, and Pusa, if you so wish. But relatively speaking, these cards right here, they're still fine to pick up, I would say, but it's not like necessary, I want to really say, especially for the higher rarity ones. So if you can find your hands on the Michiru's deck set, but even that's pretty hard to get. As you can see here, only 3 listings online, and most locals that I see, they typically don't even have this thing in stock, mainly because everybody's looking out for Shroud in Darkness, which, this is interesting. Shroud in Darkness is also completely bought out now, so little something extra. And then also Tizcar, another cycler card. A lot of Dark States decks are looking to use this. For example, Blankmeyer still seeing play, and then Heartluru, they are also kind of considering this card as well, just as a way to use up additional energy. We see here that they are pretty expensive still. There's a few cheaper quote unquote listings for under $30 before it jumps back up to way over to like $36 to $40. Tizcar is still just one of those cards that, like, it's just a pain to obtain. So, I mean, if you had it already, then good, but getting it now, if you didn't, it's not one of those cards that I would say, like, to rush out to get. Your deck could definitely use without it. It just helps to smooth out some of, like, your other, I want to say, like, it helps to smooth out the decks that don't have good enough cards to play yet. And then on top of the good cards that you would want to play, Nocturzio, if you're playing the Ignis build, just because it is a grade 4, so you have this additional grade 4 support card in the sense that it's a good ditch target, it can help filter your soul or add cards to your soul, and it's just additional shield. This one technically has overlap as well with Chronojet, so you can consider that, but this card's still relatively expensive for what it is, about $6-ish. I believe this is the more expensive of the Stride Dragons, so there's something to keep in mind. I don't think you need to play a full playset of this, but anywhere between 1 to 3 would be good enough to pick up if you don't already have this. Another Dark Stakes card that we're getting, at least for the triple rares, is Tickdown Dragon, which is Leo Odium support. Now this one's pretty interesting because not only is it a additional grade 1, but it also searches for the Distorted Bane. So it pretty much takes on the role of the Avarice Rester. Now, let's take a look at Odium. Now, Odium is still relatively expensive. Well, not really expensive, but it's pretty stable at $7 a piece right here. And then, so this one should be relatively easy to get, especially because there's a lot of quantities left on the market as well. Speaking of other cards within the deck, we have Anachronos Dragon right here. Lots of listings here as well. And looks like they're all pretty much stable around $4, $4 to $5, I would say. And then another card right here is the Instant Asunder Dragon, or Colossus rather. And this one even more so, because it's essentially just another copy of Anachronos Dragon. Lots of listings and about $3 to $4 or so. I'm not too sure if Odium's going to be doing too much within the meta, but it is something that would be nice to consider. Now, moving on to Brantgate, Empoleon gets like another card right here. This one is a pretty good one, actually. It is Soul Blast 2 on play to draw a card, and not only that, it is a CB1 for a Restander. So finally, a deck gets up its 4th attack. Now, in terms of the cards that Empoleon currently has, it's getting more cards later on, but that's like in set 11 and onwards. So for right now, original Empoleon is still holding about $3 to $4. I want to say, yeah, $3 to $4. Lots of listings on here, so you can be pretty easy to pick up. And then the only other card that I would like to consider would be the Vinstar, which is just the drive checker on the rear guard circle. This one is also pretty affordable. Yeah, just like $2 to $3 also. Overall, Empoleon's not really that popular of a deck, so you should be able to find these for cheap, especially if you ask people around. They might have it in their binder because they just forgot to bring it out, so who knows. Now, one of the big cards for set 10 is Magnetism Monster Magnetus. Now this is essentially Brantgate's Tayfault, and that is a big deal because this is the Order nation. So them finally getting their own Tayfault is a massive hit. Now, there's currently some decks that can't really utilize it, but there are others that can, such as Ava. Now we see here that Ava is, at least the Poison in Paradise Ava, is sitting around $5. Yeah, it's pretty stable at $5. But this is also a card that you don't really need to play a full playset of. You can only play 2 copies of it, just because it's really easy to recycle this card. And also Ava as a deck is just kind of eternally there. It's always been kind of good, and you'll always really see it. It's one of those decks that a lot of players will like because of how much control it gets to you. So if you are already an Ava fan, let's say, then you should already have these cards. But if you're looking to pick it up, $5 for 2 of these, not that bad. However, if we see here, we see Obscudades. Now, if we're looking at the grade 3 Obscudade here, original printing is shot up to $15 plus here. Yeah, $15 before going up to $23 and then even more than that. So that is a big jump, but kind of understandable. It is an old card, and it is a card that you do play 4 of in current Ava decks to this day. However, the reprint one right here looks like it is still Yeah, looks like it's about $10 roughly before jumping up to 20. So if you were thinking of picking up Ava as a deck, I would consider picking up your grade 3 Obscudate as soon as you can. And then the grade 2 Obscudate here, you only really play this as like a 1 of, maybe even like a 2. At least for this printing right here, it looks like it's about $5 to $6. Let me try to look up the actual like real printing, or not real printing, but the original printing. Sort of fierce. Yeah, so the original printing here is also jumped up to like $8 to $9, but it still has some listings left for about $3 to $4. So again, this card's mainly now like a tech option in current Ava decks, and with the release of the monster and release of what was it? Not release, but rather the inclusion of your grade 3 Avas. You have your grade 3 Obscudate, and then you now have the grade 2 monster. You don't really have that much space for attackers, so this is still a solid one of to have, just as like another Obscudate option. Now, going on to the research orders, the world is a blue research lab here. We see that's 2 double rare printings having about 10-ish listings or so. They're about $5 to $6, and this is usually I've seen play it as like a 2 to 3 of. It's pretty simple. I mean, you play it look a top 5 call something, and which could then trigger your monster take fault, which is a neat little synergy. So if you don't already have these cards, obviously just pick it up, but $5 for it looks like it's been stable around here for the time being. So, and then result of the experiment henceforth. This was a promo back then, and as we can see here, they're pretty affordable. The only thing of note, I would say, is that the original promo foils have jumped from the $2 market price that it was all the way up to $11, $12. So if you were sitting on these original foils, it might be a good time to offload it. But if you're attached to your Ava deck, then so be it. But there are still plenty of affordable options, as well as the original promo here, just having a lot of listings. So, and then moving on is the torrential research. This is the thing that you would use to dig for your Immergars, typically. But because the monster Tayfall is also considered a monster, that just makes the hit off of the top 5 from torrential energy research that much easier, or that much more likely. These cards are about $1, and they have like quite a bit of listings still from its original rares. They did get a reprint in either the promos right here. So the promo foils are about, let's take a look, $4 I want to say. Yeah, they're like $4, and the original FRs looks like $12, $15 as well. This is typically played as like a 2 of in most Ava decks. So if you need to, you can just get either like the original printing or the promo. It's only $1, but it's the likelihood of hitting the monster, it's just going to be a lot higher just because of the density that you play. Such as this right here, the Craggy Monster Gigaron. This is the original TD trial deck or PG, and then this card doesn't really have any additional text. It's just a PG. It just doesn't have that discard text where if it's like your last card, you don't have to discard one. But for the most part, that doesn't come up too often. It being a monster heavily outweighs that. We see here that they have really low listings. So if we look at the original printing here, they're all about $6 to $7, I want to say. This one with the number a little bit less unattractive, but it's still relatively $6, and then there's only one listing for the foil. This card is just kind of hard to come by in general though, because it's just so it's such a good synergy just to find it with your torrential research, and so it's just something to keep an eye out for if you do see it. It's worth it to pick up. And then Immigar here, original Immigar foils are way expensive for what it is, which I guess so. They're like quite over 50, but I think this is just price memory because we got the new reprint, which is also a foil, double rare foiling, and it is really affordable at like $2 to $4 or so. So I would just, if you have this like original promo foil, I would probably just get rid of it. Even though I guess you could consider that to be the higher rarity, so if you want to like match rarity your deck, then that's something to consider. But for over $50 when you have like a $2 affordable printing right here, like I don't know. And then another card that to consider is this one. This is the generic grade 1 from set 9 that has 2 effects. This is essentially a Combine Rusher that can intercept from the back row, and then on boost is a 13k. Pretty solid, I would say. Some decks or some Ava decks do play this as like a good tech option for like rushing with Immigrars. And for $2-ish, these are probably nice to pick up. And just the generic grade 1s that have the dual effects from set 9, those are all just like pretty good cards just to pick up. They're just staple cards. Dissection Angel being like the most hyped one, and also Harvest Elf as well. But I would just keep an eye out on all of these. Now, unfortunately, because this Tayfault is a monster, it has revived Elva Glima to some degree. We do see that having an effect on the WGP. Some people have been posting their results, and they have been showing some results. Now, it is still hit. You still have the choice restrict between Savared and the Penguin, as well as Moe Flash the 1. That being said, Monster Tayfault does help you dig for your Moe Flash. And as we can see here, this like bat card has gone down quite significantly from its prime. Came from like $6-ish, now under $1. The reprint one, so I guess the foil version, for the $5. If you are one of those individuals who still likes playing with Bat, I would probably pick it up, I suppose. But it's hard to say, really, because this is such a high roll deck. But Monster Tayfault could be what helps push this deck, especially with how Bat was under the radar to begin with. So I could see it like catching people off guard yet again. So now the last Brand Gate card that we'll talk about is the third myth this year. This one is essentially a Bulba Mine for the deck, but it also shuffles more importantly, so you're more likely to hit off of your Moongate searches, and it searches for Persona Rides or your orders that are specific for this deck. So we take a look here at Weisruger, and the original is about $5 to $6 here. More like $6 to $7. So not a lot of people have been picking this up. We see here the SRs have kind of low listings at 15 here, but Weisruger has been showing results in at least in the JP side with that addition of the Mythless. Just an additional name makes it so that way your orders are more likely to hit. You're not whiffing as much. You actually have call targets indeed. How it would fare against the likes of Virgilla and Bob, or even like Heartluru, that's to be seen. But it can definitely pull up a fight with the new Mythish. And then, speaking of the other Mythish here, the main one of note here is the first Mythish, the Wolf one. It is very low listings, or not very low, it has only like 8, but it is about $15 right now. This card used to be around $6 or $7. Not a lot of people really wanted to pick up Weisruger, but over time it kind of just went up as, you know, the set went out of circulation, and then with the release of this new Mythish, people are now looking at this, especially as it's one of the few ways that Weisruger can plus. We take a look here at the second Mythish here, which is the Snake. It's just an additional attacker, also the same amount of listings as the Wolf, about $7 to $8 here. No, it looks like it's about $9 to $10, but there's a lot of listings right here for $9. And then you see here that the Crow, the one that you can play up to 16 copies, there's still about $2-ish or so. This card does get a promo pack reprint later, which also means that it gets a foil printing, so that is something to look out for. But with the addition of this Mythish, you're typically maxing out on all the copies of them, at least the named ones. So the first, second, and third, you're playing 4 copies. With the Crow, I've seen people play about 6 or so, so that's not something that you would typically need to pick up, especially with like a promo like for locals coming up soon. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will just open it and they just won't even bother like keeping it, but just keep your eye out for the Wolf. And then speaking of the orders here, the Aelif Gulmani, it's just a rare and it's really cheap, but just of note is the FR. Because you are able to search this out, you're more likely to see this card. It is kind of difficult to read with the gold and the red, but you know, right here, so we see here it's like $5 to $6, but there's not a lot of listings here also, so this is something that it's not really like, you know, you need to rush out to get per se. It's just something to be aware of. Another thing that I just got reminded of is Fluctuate Buster Barrage, because the Weisruger can guard with the Mythish and then put them back to the bottom of the deck. This is an attractive option for some Weisruger lists. We see here as the FR, which is the highest rarity printing, being $30 plus. But if we take a look at, let's see, the regular one, they're still relatively expensive for what it is. I believe it's just a rare. Yeah, it's just a rare. It's $3 to $4. Hopefully this gets like a reprint in like a promo pack soon, but it's still a generic option, pretty similar to the Fencing Roar. So it's something to keep an eye out. Look through your bulk probably. And then lastly is the Moongate, really cheap, like pennies, but because it's your one of, it's kind of like Prison, how you might as well just get the higher rarity one. FR Moongates are about $3 to $4, so, and it's just a one of that you'll always see in your game, so you might as well, right? But that is something. Now moving on, we have Draconis here, the new Amorta deck. Now, I don't really see that much results from this, but it is a fun deck, and for some people, it is a pet deck of theirs, especially with Erica and moving on in the anime. This deck could look to get more support in the future. So we'll take a look at regular Amorta first. So at its regular printing, it's still about $11-ish. No, it's more like $13 to $14, I want to say. I'm not too sure if you would continue playing regular Amorta in Draconis deck, because at the end of the day, it's just another PG, but it is something that some decks could look to mess around with. One of the cards that you will need though is Gobwelius. So regular Gobwelius right here are 25. These cards did spike up, I believe, on its initial reveal of Draconis, but I stand corrected. Looks like it is about $40-ish. Now this card is way expensive. How's that right? What? Yeah, Gobwelius are just $40. I guess the TCG player listing there was lying to me. Now, this card, not only do you need to play like a 4 of in Draconis, this is also a card that is played in Reziel, and Reziel is getting additional support in this set as well as the set afterwards. And with Akina also moving on in the anime as well, it's reasonable to say that, you know, Reziel as a deck will continue to get additional support, and this is just a really strong like finisher type card in those decks. But for $40, it's like, at this point, you might as well just ask to borrow these cards. At least in Reziel, you typically only really play 2 of these cards. But if you're looking to play Draconis, though, you kind of need a full play set just with the way she works with binding cards and calling cards with the same name. It's going to be really rough just to find these cards in general, though maybe people are sick of the Reziel deck and they may look to move those copies around. It is going to be a pain to pick up, especially at this price point, though. Another card that we want to see here is Idorus. Talking with Mei Chenggu, this isn't really a card that you see that often, but it is an option that you could mess around with. This card did spike up a little bit, I believe, to like $5-ish, but it's since gone down to like the $2 to $3 at most. For the most part, I don't think that this is one of the more important cards, especially because it is one of your attackers, but you already have a potent attacker in Gabuelius, so this card does seem to go down in priority then. But regardless, it is something that you can consider as well. One of the cards that you would probably need, though, is Sequence Wizard. This is another option that you have. It's pretty much Soul Charge, and then it looks for your grade 3s, which it could be either your Persona Rides or even your Gabuelius to get things started. It's about $2 to $3. This card did spike up a little bit beforehand, but it's since then gone down with a lot of listings. But the SRs, though, SRs looks to be quite expensive. There is a playset here for $10, but it then jumps up to $20 or so. If you're looking to maybe like get some mid-max high rarities for Draconis, I would maybe want to pick that up, but for the most part, it's not something. I'm more content with at least getting the regular copies here, which there seems to be a lot of copies for. And then the last card I want to say is for Religial. This card pretty much just searches for your Gabuelius or Liel. So same thing as Sequence Wizard, and it's also just another decent attacker as well. This card really affordable at around $2 to $3, and with a lot of listings as well. So as you can see, there's a lot of like grade 2s and grade 3s that Draconis can consider. So you kind of want to like pick and choose between that. Gabuelius is more so the card that you will need, but between like Sequence Wizard, Religial, and Iridus, like you can kind of just pick and choose between that. And then another card that we're going to get is this card right here. This is essentially an updated Alden. It's just CB1, Soul Blast 1, call it grade 3, and then draw 2 cards. So it's original Alden from set 1, but for 1 less Counterblast and 1 less Soul Blast. In addition to that, it gets an additional 5k power and 5k shield with Intercept if you're on Bastion or Alden. Now, in Alden in particular, I don't think that this is a make or break card. Alden has a lot more issues than what this card can fix, but we're moving on to Bastion though. Something that I've like noticed like a couple of months ago is that Bastion Accord's just been up. Like I don't see anybody really play this card. Like it's always just been up though around like $13-14. And I don't know why. Like I said, I just don't see people playing this. Although with the release of that new card, I could see people maybe digging up their old Bastion decks to try to like play with it. But I don't think I've seen Bastion putting up results with the list for it. It looks to be a fun locals deck, but if you want to play, I don't know, like $40-50 for like a playset of this, then it's up to you. But I don't think it's worth it. But you know, maybe it's your pet deck, maybe you miss playing Bastion back in the day, so you want to give it a shot. And then the only other card I would like to consider for Bastion is the Grander Edge. I believe this is just like an additional 10k. Yeah, it's just additional shield. It doesn't have intercept though, which kind of sucks. And it also has the effect to count as multiple cards if you would need to reveal something, just to help out with the ride line. This card is relatively expensive for what it is. It's about $4 to $5. I'm not sure how many copies you want to play, but it's just a good utility because in a deck full of grade 3s, you kind of need as much shield as you can get. And it's not the worst beater. It's just a 23. I believe with Bastion, it makes it like 28, I want to say. But regardless, Grander Edge is another option to consider from there. And then moving on, we have Nanaclear here. So Nanaclear is the new one that Ruka plays. And she plays kind of like xenophobic, because if you look here, her effect requires more rear guards with one who arrives with Paradise. So you kind of want to max out on all of those units that have those names, or those, its name be that, but that does mean that you want to like lower down on the amount of generic cards that you do play. That's not to say that you don't play any though. There are some cards that you can consider. For example, Harvest Elf, one of those double like combined units from set 9. Harvest Elf did see a lot big spike because of the Astasian deck. You also play it in Zorga. It's just one of those generic grade 1s that can be played in quite a lot of Stoicheia decks right now, especially if they care about plant tokens, or just like the utility of killing the 2 rear guards to draw a card in Zorga. We take a look here, it's about $15 to $16. Set 9 should still be relatively available. I still see a lot of stores offering it as pricing for their locals, but once set 10 comes out, we're going to move on for that. Harvest Elf is something to keep an eye out. That being said though, it is 31 listings on this card, so there are a lot of listings available for this card. It shouldn't be too hard to get, especially since set 9 is still a relatively new set. It's still something that you want to keep your eye out for, especially if you plan to play this deck, because it's really easy to build Nanaclear since most of the cards that you'll need will just come from the set as a whole. Another generic though, unfortunately, is Alvina. Now I don't think Alvina is that necessary in Nanaclear, but it is just another option. That being said, it is a very expensive option that is in desperate need of a reprint. Only 6 listing here, and for more than $50. I don't even know what else to say about this. Like, this was about $30. I still thought it was expensive at the time, and this card has just been going up and up and up. Like, this card went up because of Astasian, but yeah, like, I don't think it's worth it to pick up Alvinas for that much, especially for the power level that Nanaclear is at. Just kind of hope for a reprint, but my god, this card is absurdly expensive. And then another card of obviously Gun Cyclers, just generic cards to consider here. This one's probably went down just a little bit, I want to say. It was like in like the mid like 20s to high 30s. It does have some cheaper listings here for in the low 20s, like 23 to 24, but then it jumps back up again to like the $30. Stoicheia is one of those nations though that I see playing the Gun Cyclers the most, so it is something to consider. It has 13 listings, which is a fair amount, but until these cards get a reprint, these cards are just like always good to like have in your like back pocket as like just an option when in deck building. They're just so flexible, being able to smooth out your ride, and especially for decks like Nanaclear, for example, where they're so self-contained, just having something like this to smooth out any sort of like extra like discards, or even like to help with your guard, and I guess you could utilize like the on play effect to like call something out or add an order. At least with this, you're able to add back the Nanoclear order, but so hopefully you get a reprint similar to the Scry Dragons in set 6, where they would just put in like the triple rare slot and you got one per box. So that's nice. And then this is also one of the sets that does have additional lyrical support in a new ride line of Juicy Fruity. Now this is interesting. It is a lyrical deck that's focused around plants. Now, the main issue with this is that a lot of the plant support are all locked behind Stoicheia, and this is the first time that Lyrical gets anything regarding that. That being said, they do get cards that kind of support tokens, because we did have things like Arthisaria beforehand. But that being said, because of how new a token as a mechanic is, there's not much that is necessary for this, which is why we mainly have to look towards generics. Now, obviously, again, Gun Cycler. However, Pressure here, the Gun Cycler for Lyrical, has gone down quite a bit. It was around $22-ish if we go back even further. High of like $35, $36. And that was with the hype of Arthisaria, but Arthisaria hasn't been putting up results, and even for things like Lyrical Cup too, it's like you don't really see it that often. The top deck was, I believe, Leishafell, and Leishafell didn't really play this card all that often, maybe like 2 cards or 2 copies at most, but this card has gone significantly down. It's now about $15 before going up to about $17, $18 here. This, I want to say, for a gun cycling card, is pretty good. Especially because right now we're still getting reveals for the new lyrical cards for the new set. I think the Christmas set. So this is something to keep an eye out for, not just for Juicy Fruity if you're interested in that, but just for all lyrical decks, just with the amount of like new ride lines or new support that we get for it every year or so. Speaking of that, Eternally Yuika. Now, keep in mind though, Yuika has had a lot of additional printings, in addition to a Koro reprint, which isn't here because it isn't named Yuika in the card name. It is named Yuika within the text, but besides the point, we do see here that they're all hovering around like $15 to like $20 or so. If we look at the most recent printing right here, the Festival Booster, they're all about like $14 after shipping, and that's probably like one of the lowest that Yuika has been in quite a long time. So this is like a card where its utility is something that Bushiroad has been designing lyrical decks kind of around, so it's always like a good card to have. And with the amount of times they've like reprinted this, I wouldn't even be surprised if they made like a alt art Yuika in like the new like lyrical set, but that's kind of asking for a little bit too much. But regardless, Yuika is just one of those cards that I wouldn't mind picking this up, but it's also a card that I'm not in any rush to get unless I'm interested in playing either, you know, a new lyrical deck such as Juicy Fruity or one of the new Christmas ones that are coming out. And then the last card that I want to consider for Juicy Fruity is the Rainbow Jewel Beast here. Now this is the one that removes the ride line, and what this one is either additional shield or it can add back Persona Ride. Now, as Juicy Fruity being a new deck focused around a new mechanic to lyrical in tokens, you kind of have the option to play a lot of more, how you say, generic options, just because before lyrical would benefit off of generics that bounce back your rear guards, but with new cards being like tokens, there's not really benefit to bouncing those. So you could play like 2-ish copies of this as like a filler card. That being said though, it's not a card that you really would clamor to pick up. Like, it's not a card that makes or breaks the deck. It is just a good tech option, but for $15 for per copy, or $15 to $20, and I would probably play 2 of it in GC Fruity, but even then, it's like still something that I probably like. It's not something I really want to pick up, but it's kind of something that, like, at the moment, the deck needs all the help that it can get. So that's just like, I wouldn't rush out to get this, but maybe if you're looking to play GC Fruity, you could ask to like borrow this card, because this card did have an initial hype or around Artisaria, but has since gone down. But it hasn't really recovered all that much since then. So yeah. And that's about it for the set 10 market watch. We're still a little bit away, so it's good to keep an eye out on all of these cards, just because once the set officially releases, a lot more people will start clamoring for all of these cards. So just keep in mind of all the cards that you are looking to pick up, whether that means like new decks or support for your older decks. Just look at what you would need and try to make the best decision that you can. And yeah, that's about it. You just probably follow me on Twitter, I guess, if you want more market watch and funny posts. So yeah, have a good rest of your day.